You want to run an adventure? Then watch this video. I'm going to walk you through They Croak Every Night and prepare you for running your first adventure in Along the Leyline. Check the links below for a link to the free adventure, They Croak Every Night. You can find it on TTRPG. We're going to be walking through it right now. So if you want to download it, you can walk through it with me. We're going to be starting on page 35. The pages before page 35 are for making your own character if you're interested in that. You can also watch a video on how to make your own character, link in the descriptions below. So you want to run your first game, but you're not sure how, and you're worried about reading a big book that's like 70 pages or something like that. Well, take a deep breath. I'm going to help you get prepared for your first adventure. Just watch this video. Okay. The first thing that you need to know is what's going on. What is the problem? Why have the adventurers been hired? Well, there's this mad mage, okay, called Zatirtiel. You don't have to call him Zatirtiel because that's kind of a hard name to call, but you can just call him the Mad Mage, or he calls himself the Frog King. And the Frog King, this Mad Mage, he wants to turn the entire town into frogs. And he showed up a couple months ago and told the town of Bufo, hey, I'm going to turn you all into frogs. And then he poofed out of there, and he's been tying up these magic ropes all throughout the swamp to draw in the ley lines to power up this ritual spell to turn the entire town of Bufo into frogs. Well, not everybody in the town of Bufo wants to be turned to frogs. In fact, Arnath does not want to be turned into a frog, and he is hiring the PCs to stop the Mad Mage. So Arnath is the general store owner, and if you look on page 35, you can see all of the mundane items that he has for sale in his general store, and he will happily sell any of those items to the players. Now, if you're running this as your first adventure and you're using pre-generated characters, then those pre-generated characters have something called dungeon gear. And this dungeon gear is any mundane item they can think of. It becomes that item when they decide what they want it to be, and then it stays that way forever. So if they want a 10-foot pole, then the dungeon gear becomes a 10-foot pole and it stays that way. If they need some rope, it becomes rope. It's any mundane item they want. So they should have a lot of these items already. But if they wanted to get more or something specific and save their dungeon gear for later, they could buy it at Arnath's general store if they have some gold. Now, if they don't have any gold, they can probably convince Arnath by rolling a persuasion check or a diplomacy check, depending on how they kind of word it. And you can choose which one based on what you think. Is it more diplomatic, or are they trying to convince him based on his emotions, right? Are they trying to do logic? It's diplomacy. Or are they trying to do emotions? It's persuasion. So what you want to do is go to page 54. And on page 54, you've got an entire list of random encounters in the swamp. You can read through it beforehand to kind of prepare what's out there and kind of know what is going to be there, or you can leave it as a surprise. So as they're walking through the swamp, they should run into one of these. If they fail their navigation nature check by rolling 3 or under, okay? If they roll 3 or under on their navigation nature check, they get kind of lost on the way there, and then they eventually make it. And if they get lost, you're going to roll twice on this table. And so you'll roll each encounter. So the first time they go, let's say they rolled a 2, then a gator is going to attack because it says gator on our random table. And then they can try to go around the gator, they can run away from the gator, whatever they've got to do. And then you're going to roll again if they got lost. If not, then they find their way to Zatirtiel's tower, or the Mad Mage's tower. Let's say they got lost, and we're going to roll again, and we got a 19. A toadkin swims by. So this is swamp, and toadkins and frogs are all over the place. So this is a time where the players could interact with this toadkin, talk to them, or they could just kind of watch the toadkin go by. It's kind of up to the players how much they want to interact with these random encounters. Some are combat, some are social, some are just weird things, some are actually even treasure that they can find, like a skeleton. I'll let you go read it. It's on page 54. Okay, now we need to talk about the tower itself. If you go to page 44, there is an outline of the tower. And one thing I want to point out is in this tower, you're going to see a dead standing tree. It's called a snag, okay? A dead standing tree is a snag. And we've got this withered snag here, and there's ropes connecting that snag up to the tower. And all of these ropes that are all around the ley lines, all around the swamp, are drawing in the ley lines to the tower and powering up the tower, powering up Zatirtiel's big ritual spell. Okay, now that you have that in mind, if players touch those ropes, bad things will happen. They're gonna have to make a mind save or they're gonna lose mind. So they don't wanna touch the ropes. The ropes are just kind of like, they're a trap. They are a trap. So when you are describing these ropes, you want to talk about how the players feel magical energy emanating from the ropes. You can even have Arnath say, hey, watch out for the ropes. But you don't want to just say, okay, there are ropes. You have to describe it as a big, powerful thing. It's how the power is going through. You can think of them like magical power lines. So be sure to broadcast that to your players, especially if they start approaching the ropes. If they say they go and inspect the ropes, talk about how they're emanating magical power. All right. The ropes are going to be probably the first thing that they see, and they could even, if they find the ropes, walk to it and be guided toward the tower. If they look into the withered tree, they will find a hole that leads down into room 5. Or they can go straight through the front door, which leads into room 4. Or they could go up to a tower and get to room 3. Or they could try to climb all the way to the top and go to room 1. So there's lots of different approaches that they could take. There's even one more. They could go into the swamp and dive down and get to the bottom level. So there's lots of different ways that players can approach this tower, but they're trying to make it to room 2 because that's where Zatirtiel is. Now they don't know. The players don't know where Zatirtiel is and where the spell is going. But logic should lead them that if they follow the ropes that are all around the swamp, it's going to eventually take them to Zatirtiel in the tower because those are powering that spell and he's casting it. So following the ropes is a way to find out where they're going. And I would rule that the players can feel the direction of the power through the ropes. If you want to, you can have them roll an Aether check to just figure that out if you don't want to say they just know it. But I like to give them, hey, they know it, because that's going to direct players and give them a choice. Do we want to go straight to Zatirtiel? Do we want to stop him right now? Or do we want to kind of explore? And so that's what I would do. But you can run it how you want. All right, let's take a look at each of these rooms individually. At the top of the tower, there is a trapdoor that leads down into room 2. So if they're just like, you know what, we want to fly up to the top, we want to jump people up to the top, we want to get a big ladder and climb all the way to the top, they could figure out ways of getting there. Now, they can't probably take the ropes because they're full of magical energy. But if they have a grappling hook, they could easily throw it up there and just climb up to the side of the tower, make it all the way to the top, and open up that door. Now, in the top of the tower, there are ropes leading all into that trapdoor. So you should describe that there are ropes all over and there's like a hum of magical energy, and you might make it difficult terrain, and you might have them try to like body save, or they trip over one of the ropes and then they have to mind save. You can make it more dangerous if you want, or you can make it easier. That's up to you. But understand, there's all these ropes leading down to this trapdoor. They find the trapdoor, they open it, they go to room 2. In room 2 is the main room. This is where Zatirtiel is, okay? And he's trying to cast this giant spell to turn all of the town of Bufo into frogs, and he is very dedicated because he knows something that the town people and the players don't know. And that secret is there is a snake cult, and they will eat all of the people of Bufo. They're gaining power. They're going to take over. And Zatirtiel doesn't want them to get eaten. So he's going to turn them all into frogs. Now, he didn't tell the townspeople that's why he was doing what he was doing, because he's a crazy mage. But that's his motivation. So he is well-intended, if still crazy, and, he's a mad mage. What can I say? We need conflict in order for this to work. Okay, so Zatirtiel's there. He's trying to cast a spell. He's thinking he's going to be saving the lives of everybody in Bufo. So he's going to be very determined not to stop. He will do everything he can to continue to cast this spell. With him is a breadkin. Yeah, a loaf of bread that's animated because he needed a helper. So he made one out of bread that he could eat and then still be there. It's fun. Just have a good time, okay? All right, in this room, the players are going to have to attack Zatirtail if they want him to stop. If they're there to help him, then he is going to have them roll some checks. Let's read real fast. Because it says in our adventure here, what's going to happen. So if they're there to stop him, then they have 2d4 rounds or the spell gets cast. So there's our timer. If the players cannot stop Zatirtail in that time, Zatirtail successfully casts the spell. But if the players come there to help Zatirtail, then the magic ropes are being pushed to their limits. And they have 2d4 rounds to make 4 successful Aether checks of target 3. All right. Basically, we want there to be a dramatic moment once the players get into this room, because it's kind of like the final room of the dungeon. And if they're there to help Zatirtail, he doesn't know that going in, but you might. And if you do, and you can kind of determine the player's intentions, and if you're not sure, you can just ask them, hey, are you trying to help him? Or are you trying to stop him? And usually players will just tell you. And from there, you can decide, are there issues with the ropes and the players have to help him cast? Or is Zatirtail stuck on casting it? You change what the big, I don't know what the word is for this. You change the problem to fit what the players are trying to do, okay? If you think that's cheating, well, it kind of is, but we want to make dramatic moments, and that's what we're doing. That's the role of the referee, is to try and engineer a dramatic moment. You're not going to necessarily know how it ends. Maybe they win. Maybe Zatirtail is defeated, or maybe they help him cast his spell. That's not for us to decide. What we're just trying to do is make whatever they're trying to do hard, so that when they succeed in it, it feels good, right? Because if they're like, oh, I want to bake a pizza. Okay, you make a pizza. Great, you have a pizza. Now what? There's no story. There has to be something for the players to overcome in order to make a good story. And tabletop role-playing games and Along the Leyline is about telling a story. So we need the players to overcome this. This is our big problem. All right, having said that, now we know what's in room 2. There's all these kind of runes on the ground. There's big ropes. There's a Zatirtail there trying to cast a spell, and there's a breadkin. If you want more detail about what's in this room, there is maps in the adventure that you can print and play with. All right, let's talk about room 3, my favorite room, the library and the balcony. So if you're looking at the tower, you see a balcony outside. The players can climb up through that balcony. In fact, I've had players do that when I've ran this adventure. And once they get in, they're going to see this room. It's full of bookshelves all along the walls. And on the walls, there are armor. And the armor is living armor. The players don't know that. If the players leave the room unmolested, they just walk through, nothing, the armor doesn't do anything. But if the players start ransacking the room, mistreating it, or if they go and mess with the armor, then the living armor attacks. And these living armor are not easy to deal with. The best thing for the players to do is to retreat or to run away. Now, if your players think, you know what, we can take it, we're going to fight these living armor, then have at it. You can totally do that. They can win if they play smart. Okay, so that's the living armor. That is the library. There are some spells. There's some other things for them to find in the room, okay? You can place things, some clues about what's going on in the room if you want. Or you can roll on the random loot table and they'll give them some clues. Like when I played this last time, I rolled and found that there was a giant snake skin underneath the big table because that's where they were looking. And the snake skin kind of gave clues about this snake cult that they later found out about. Let's talk about room 4. Now, room 4 is going to be the entrance. So Zatirtail has planned a giant banquet. And I don't think I explained this in the module, but this is what you get because you're watching this. So lucky you, extra, insight. So in the entrance, Zatirtail has planned this giant banquet for when he's turned everybody into Frogkin so that he can kind of say, congratulations, you're a Frogkin now. And so he's covered this table with a bunch of flies and maggots and other things that frogs like to eat. Well, that has attracted giant frogs from the swamp, and they've come in and busted down the door, and now they're eating all the grubs. So you have to either run past the frogs, which will ignore you if you run fast enough, or you have to fight through the frogs or go around them. The lucky thing with this module is that there's the balcony and there's also the trapdoor, so there's a couple of other ways to just get straight around the frogs. Or you can go down underneath the tower and just run up through the staircase and avoid the frogs that way too. So there's a lot of ways to avoid combat in this module, which I really do like. But the frogs, they're tough. They're tough to deal with because they will grab people with their tongues. And so if you want to make a combat, if you think the players are just running through too fast, then have the frogs shoot their tongues out and try to grab the players. This is a way to slow down and slow the pace of your game if you need that. Part 8, if you're looking at this, has the withered tree, which is on the outside, which we've already discussed, which has a tunnel leading down into section 6. All right, if you look on page 47, it's got the biology and tactics of the living armor. And if you look on page 49, it's got the biology and tactics of the giant frogs. So in these modules, I like to describe what the characters are trying to do, especially the monsters, and how they want to do combat. If you look at the stat blocks of these monsters, you will see they've got their HP, they've got their MP, they've got their defense rolls, they've got saving throws, all like players. But then you'll look at actions, and players have a list of skills that they're going to be doing. But the monsters just have those actions because those are the optimal things that they want to do, right? So the living armor usually wants to hit with its mace because it's got a D8 in it. Now it only deals bludgeoning. So if they notice, hey, all my attacks aren't working well, they will switch to their sword, which can deal slashing or piercing. Or if they get disarmed with their bludgeoning, they'll hit with their sword. If the players fight the living armor or the giant frogs and win, then there is loot for them to find on the bodies if they decide to rifle through the bodies. Now, obviously they have equipment. Now, the frogs don't have equipment because they're just animals, right? They're just really large animals. But the living armor has equipment. So that mace and that sword and that plate mail that was the living armor, they can pick up. Now, if you're going to be playing a long campaign, you're going to continue with this, then I would probably make that plate mail cursed and it could come back later to haunt them. But if this is just a one shot, it's just plate mail. It's just plate mail. Let them wear it. We're good. If they head down from the main room, the entrance room, they're going to go to section 5, which is Zach's quarters. Zach is the breadkin. He's the sentient loaf of bread. And in there, we, of course, smell yeast because he's bread and that's where he lives. And of course, there'd be lots of yeast there. There's a tiny bed, a tiny desk, a tiny chest of drawers, and a tiny door, which is locked. It's on the far side of the room. So the players can search the room, and if they do, you'll roll on the loot table, find something in Zach's quarters, or they can try to pick the lock or bust it down. If they do, they'll go to the next section, which is the dungeon. In the dungeon, you'll find frog-like creatures. These are these test subjects for Zatirtiel's experiment. So he wanted to make sure that his spell would work, so he got a couple of test subjects. And that's what is in that room. And then you'll see that a portion of the wall has been dug out. So if they go from the tree, they're going to go straight to this dungeon. So if they go from the willow tree, they'll go to this dungeon, which will give them this really eerie feeling that, hey, I don't really know where I am. I don't know what's going on. And there's these strange creatures here. That's the feeling they should get if they're there. And of course, if they want to go up, they have to get through that door, or they can go down. If they go down, they'll enter the flooded room. And in the flooded room, there's a series of floating boxes that the players can hop around on, or if they can go swimming. If they do go swimming, there is a giant snake. This giant snake is a part of the serpent cult, right? And it will join the party if it thinks they're going to try to stop Zatirtiel. Okay, so they don't actually have to be trying to stop Zatirtiel, but if the snake thinks that they are, then it will join them, okay? Now, how you can communicate with the snake, they have to be able to speak snake tongue. Otherwise, they're going to have trouble communicating with it. The players can also feed it, and it will temporarily join them if they feed it because it's hungry. It is still looking for Zatirtiel, but you don't have to make that explicit. You don't have to explain that to the players unless they're like really talking to it. But once it comes in contact and finds Zatirtiel, then it will totally attack. Because this snake is trying to get close to Zatirtiel and it thinks that the PCs might be servants of Zatirtiel, this mad wizard, it may not reveal that it is trying to kill Zatirtiel, unless the players explicitly say, we're looking for the mad mage, we're trying to kill him. You also don't have to make the snake be sentient at all. If you just want a giant snake to fight, then you could just have a giant snake to fight. I hope you're getting the hint here that all of these things are tools for you to play with, and you just kind of pull the levers and use what you need to add the flavor and the depth for your game. That's how this is designed. So use what you need and don't worry about the rest. All right, there is a stat block for the giant snake. It has some really cool things, like it can grapple you, and it has some cool random loot, like a giant snake tooth, or some venom, which is a vial of poison. All right, if you look at the last room, which is just the swamp, it talks about how there are ropes, so I've already described this, and different places around the swamp. If the players decide, you know what, we're not going to try to face the Zatirtiel head on, then you're going to want They Croak Every Night Part 2, because it describes all of these different places and they can go to all those different places and cut off the ley lines. If you're like, oh no, I don't have Part 2, and the players decide that they wanted to go do that, well then I've given you a quick list of other parts of the swamp, and you can improvise from there and talk about these different ropes and have them try to break the ropes using magic or using their ether skills. So there's a frog god shrine, there's a mangrove forest, a tar pit, a sunken cave, a flooded graveyard, 3 fallen logs, an ancient standing stones, and a snake temple. So hopefully that gives you some ideas, enough to kind of build out just a quick scene and then have the players move on. In those scenes, I recommend, if you're not going straight to the tower itself, pull some of the monsters from the other parts of the adventure. Pull living armor. That would make sense in like the Frog God's Shrine or the Snake Temple. Pull the giant frogs. That really works anywhere from wherever you go. Pull the snake, like in the graveyard or anywhere else, right? So the frog and the snake, they're all over the swamp anyway, so they can be pulled anywhere. And then that living armor would make sense to be at the shrine or the temple. Once the players enter into the second room and they either help Zatirtiel or they stop him, it's time for the players to head home. If Zatirtiel is still alive at the end, he will explain what he's doing and why he thinks he is saving the town of Bufo. And if the players decide to kill him, then obviously he can't explain that, but he could have notes in his grimoire, in his spell book, that explain what's going on. Once they get back home, if they have stopped everybody from turning into frogs, then Arnath is going to be very excited and pay all of the players each 1d100 gold. So you just roll a d100 and everybody gets that amount of gold. That's how you end adventures in Along the Leyline, and that means every couple of sessions or so, the players should be leveling up. If the spell is successful and everybody in town gets turned into frogs, then there are a couple of people in town who are happy to be frogkin. They wanted to be frogkin because they actually were different species, but they were married and they couldn't have kids together because the biology didn't work. So they'll be really excited and happy about it. Their names are... So because you're watching this video, I'm going to give you a sneak peek into part 2. There are 8 villagers of Bufo. Arnath Daleson heads the general store. Holgi and Hannah are halfling farmers. Quincy and Plutel are orc fishers. Debbie is a halfling who is married to Za, an orc. They are both trappers. Otho Adercatch is a human gator hunter. So in this town, Debbie and Za want to be frogkins because that would mean they could have kids together. So if you get to the end of the adventure and they failed, it is still a happy ending. It kind of is a consolation prize. Debbie and Za will actually pay the players 1d100 gold for successfully casting the spell. So if you want to, at the beginning of the adventure, you could have Debbie and Za talk about how they need their help to help Zatirtiel cast the spell because they're worried that it's not working with all of the ropes, especially since Arnath sold him the ropes. If you made it this far, thank you so much for watching. I do want to point out that there are printables at the very end of this module. There is a mini zine that describes more about the sneak cult. There are item cards that you can use. There are print and play maps, and there are print and play standees. If you're wondering, how do I make those standees? There is also a video about how to make those standees. Thank you so much for watching. I hope your game goes well. If you do run this adventure, please tell me about it. Please tell me how it went. Let me know in the comments below. Thank you so much again for watching. Please like, subscribe, tell me about how it went, and I hope your games are full of dread and laughter.